So I'm here with my classmate from 7th grade, Gary Chartier, and so we knew each other for what, about 3 months in 1978?
78, pretty briefly in the fall when I was living up in the Anglin area.
Whoops, I didn't even have the... That's okay. I had the lens cap closed. But that's okay, we still got the
Hello
audio.
again. Here I am.
So what brought you to Pacific Union College for 3 months, and then why did you leave so quickly? Was there a scandal?
I'd like to say so, but I think it was a little more mundane than that. My dad was a physician. He wasn't getting along as well with his colleagues as he would have liked here and wanted to explore some other possibilities in a different political environment, and so he relocated up there, and then he was wooed back down to the hospital where he'd been practicing until we'd left, and so we returned here.
Oh, so you grew up here in Loma Linda?
Well, I lived in Corona, which is well, the house I lived in for much of that time was about 15 minutes away from here in Corona, and then I came over here to La Sierra Elementary and Academy and then University. Yeah, grew up over.
So you spent what, like all about 8 years of your life here in this area?
Moved here. Let's think. I was born in Glendale. I don't know whether I'm looking at or away from the camera.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. I was born in Glendale. Lived there till I was about 4. Then moved to North Carolina. Came back here in 1974 when I was 7 and a half, and have pretty much been here ever since, apart from the time in Anglin and some time that I spent in England. Other than that, I've been here pretty consistently. And it's interesting, since you want to focus on growing up Adventist, that the trajectory was from Adventist institutional environment to Adventist institutional environment. My dad was practicing at Glendale Adventist Hospital. Then in North Carolina, we were at the Adventist Hospital in Fletcher, and then in Corona at a hospital that, while not institutionally Adventist, had been founded by Adventists and was clearly linked with the local Adventist community. So, it was a very Adventist childhood.
Now, I'm trying to put my finger on why this area just shouts Adventist to me. Well, I'm here, and it reminds me of being in Avondale and being in Anglin. And so you've lived in Adventist enclaves, and you've lived among the Goyim, the non-Adventists. What's unique about an Adventist enclave?
Why am I less sociologically self-aware than I'd like to be here? You asked me this question when you arrived, and I began puzzling over it then, and I'm still not sure I know what.
It's in the country, so that's one thing, right?
Yeah, but it's not really. This is in a lot of ways, I think, pretty indistinguishable from a lot of other suburban spaces in Southern California. What this has been probably one of the least rural Adventist campus environments. It's always been, there was a farm here in the past, but that hasn't been true for a while, and even if there was a farm, the city wasn't that far away. It wasn't certainly as removed as Anglin is. So I don't really think of it as in the country, but it's interesting that it feels country-like to you.
Country-like to me.
Interesting.
Because I know Sister White, didn't she teach that cities were the locus of evil?
That's been a big part of, yes, absolutely. It's been a big part of the Adventist scene for a long time. Cities were places full of Catholic immigrants and, temptations of all sorts. Absolutely, I think that's.
And conspicuous consumption is pretty frowned on in Adventist life.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And so, is that another thing that makes the neighborhood distinctive?
Yeah.
It's just a kind of sort of moderate middle
very
class
very
space.
Understated, very understated. It's not showy at all.
Yeah.
It just has a calm Nice. It feels a lot like being in Utah. Have you ever been to Utah?
Not except to just sort of pass through.
Okay, it's hot and desert, and it's like wholesome and godly, and just a bunch of nice Protestant people. So what did you love and hate about growing up Adventist?
It's all kind of mixed together, isn't it? I mean, I think the best part probably, as with so many aspects of our lives, is the reflex of the worst part. I think the best part is a sense of belonging, the sense that in a culture that is increasingly fragmented, one might actually have a life in which the various elements of one's existence are all kind of woven together. I mean, growing up in this place, I was worshiping and working and studying, and playing with many of the same people. I wasn't functioning in the way that I think a lot of people do, who sort of drift from one isolated segment of reality to another. And that, for me at least, that sense that my life could be lived whole was, I think, very appealing. And I still think that's valuable and important. Knowing as many people as I do, having as many friends in one space, or even in the case of those who've moved on elsewhere, still I think sharing a pretty intense set of experiences and connections. That's very important. But I think that's the flip side of the worst part of growing up Adventist for me, which is that being part of a group that is very intent on preserving group cohesion and group identity can very easily turn into, as I was just talking to a friend about this morning, can turn into a kind of superiority and self-righteousness and exclusiveness that can lead to an obsession with one's own sort of purity, and can create opportunities to feel disconnected from people who either aren't part of the community or are but don't fit in. So I think that, for me, probably has been the most troubling feature.
I'm going to just reflect on that same question here. I'll put the camera there. So I'm trying to think what I loved and hated about. Here I'll answer this question and then bounce it also off on you.
Yeah.
Now one of the things that I hated about growing up Adventist is that I didn't feel like I was at the center of things.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was out in the country, and like when you watch the news, very rarely was the Seventh-day Adventist Church or Seventh-day Adventists, affecting the world, affecting the news. Like we would get our own news through the Review and Herald or whatever. But when you turned on the news, or you picked up Time magazine or the LA Times, I just never felt like we were at the center of what was going on in the world. Felt like we were out on the periphery doing our own thing.
Sure.
Did you sense that, and did it bother you?
I certainly think that's exactly right. And indeed, when we do get news coverage, it's often not the kind we particularly want. I mean, either something bad's happened or there's just something odd. I mean, it's not regularly the case that something really celebratory happens.
And I think it's part of the very religion that it's kind of otherworldly.
Well, yeah, I think that's right, and I think this gives me a chance to get on a sociological and historical soapbox for a second. Think about the history of Adventism. You've got a group of people who are persuaded that the world is going to come to an end. Right. And unavoidably, that puts them into conflict with neighbors who clearly don't experience things that way. And they've got, for this brief period in the late 1830s and early 1840s, a sense that they've tapped into this tremendously important vein of truth that sets them apart from those neighbors And, you know,